Franco. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, look, it's really quite a thrill to speak to you guys today, really, and I find it a very interesting time for us both. Because, you know, like this slide, sunset, you know, this is the twilight of my career. You know, I'm nearly at the end. I'll be 70 next year. It's not over yet, but, you know, let's face it, the sun is setting. But for you guys, the sun's just rising. It's just starting. Your adventure, where you're going to go, you know, it's all in your own hands now, isn't it? And I guess what I'm hoping to do today, I'm going to share with you some stories, some things that were interesting for me. But what I don't have for you is any advice. The thing about advice is, particularly with design, there's so many different possibilities and journeys that each individual in this room will have, that what worked for me might be completely irrelevant for you, or might be a complete yawn. So I can share my things, what's happened to me, and there'll be some things that you might pick up on and other things that will be irrelevant for you, because the world's changed too. So I've picked a couple of words that I'm going to use to highlight some of the things that happened to me that, you know, I think you'll find interesting. And the first word here is nurture. You know, care, protect someone while they're growing. Now, my first job was with Philips Electronics. I graduated from RMIT in 1978. 46 years ago, I've been doing industrial design. And I have to say to you, you know, except for a handful of days, every day I've loved. You know, there are a few days where you go, oh, this is going to go pear-shaped. But on the whole, everything has been just a fantastic, fun job. So you couldn't hope for a better career, really, you know, if you walked in my shoes. So I started with Philips Electronics back in 1978, first job after leaving RMIT. And back then, we were on a drawing board course. So this is a bit of a history lesson as well. You can see how the profession has changed over the decades that I'm going to share with you. And you've got to speculate a little bit now about what the future holds. You know, you're going to be dramatically influenced by technology and AI and all sorts of things in the next decade or two. So it's an interesting challenge. So here's a sketch of a 16-inch portable TV set. And I did hundreds of sketches like this and really learnt to draw. And drawing's one of those things that I've always enjoyed. So I still sketch today and create ideas and use it as a fast path to bring something to fruition. But you don't have to be good at drawing. You know, there's thousands of different ways to create something, but it's a tool that's worked for me. But during my Philips days, what's really important when the word nurture is that for the first 2 years after graduating, they kept me out of harm's way. I did instruction book covers, exploded views, drawings of all sorts, but they kept me out of the heat of the kitchen. And I watched the senior designers operate. I watched how they conduct themselves in meetings. I saw how they resolve complicated problems, discussed with mechanical and electronic engineers, visited factories, learned such a lot without any pressure. And that was I guess it set the footings for my career, because I was able to grow carefully and quietly while being nurtured. And if you can be so lucky. Look, you know, everyone talks about resilience, the needing to be tough. You know, how do you get that? How do you build those sort of internal strength? I don't know, really. The answers are tricky. But with resilience, this story comes to mind. This is the Victa lawnmower. And after leaving Philips, I was with Philips for 7 years, worked in Eindhoven in Holland, and came back to Australia and started Blue Sky. And we gradually started picking up clients here and there. I continued to work for Philips, actually, and I've worked for Philips for, I don't know, 30 years. Another 20 odd years after I left them. I continued to work with them as a consultant. So a wonderful influence on my life. But Victa was interesting. Victa was run by a managing director named Andrew King. And what was interesting about Andrew is he was a mechanical engineer by training. So he really understood every nut and bolt on the mower. He wasn't just a marketing guy that had gravitated to the top. He understood the brand and he understood the heritage he was holding. It's an iconic Australian brand and it stood for something. So we were designing away and we created a beautiful looking mower and we had good ergonomics and various things about it. And Andrew said to us, look, that's really good. We're very happy with how it's going, but we can't really move on to development until you can prove to me that it cuts better than all the previous Victas and cuts better than all the competitors. Okay, so that suddenly puts some heat in the kitchen. It's one thing to make a pretty mower with good ergonomics. It's another thing to make a mower that's the best mower. Okay, so what we did was we bought all the competitor mowers. We went out the back of Revesby, where there was a big oval unmowed close to the factory. We put the Honda and the Massport and the Victa down and we mowed a 20-metre stretch of grass and then we weighed all the catches. And the Victa, which had our deck, which we had created, was about the same as the others. And Andrew said, oh, that's good, but we can't move on to development. And now we've got springtime coming, because they work back from springtime. In Bunnings, you have to have the stores all loaded for the 1st of September with mowing gear. It's just the way the commercial world works. So now we've got time pressure, and we've got a mower that Andrew won't let move forward. So the deck is an involute spiral. It's a complicated piece of geometry. The blade spins in there. It creates a pressure differential that sucks the grass up and throws it into the catcher. And an involute spiral is a piece of complicated engineering. And it's a bit of a black art, it turns out. So we made a fiberglass buck. We kept changing the shape, going back out to Milpera, weighing the catches, just the same. Change the involute spiral again. What about this? What about that? Out to Milpera, weighed the same. Sometimes worse than the competitors, other times better. The hours are going by, the weeks, the stress is building. Andrew won't let it go until it's a better mower. So finally we made some changes. We had engineers working on it. We knew all about the theory of an involute spiral, but we still couldn't get it to perform better until one day we made a series of changes and it worked. And then we were able to move on with SolidWorks and build the rest of the geometry and get the thing into production, which is still in the market today, 20 years later, which is interesting, isn't it? When you do it well, it has longevity. And I'll never forget the lessons that Andrew King taught us around quality and around why make something that's pretty. It's just it's using limited resources of the planet without really doing something significant, which we did. Hubris. This is an interesting word, isn't it? You know, excessive pride and self-confidence. So we'd had a few successes back then, and I must have thought I was pretty good. And the Olympic torch tender was coming up, and I thought that'll be something that we ought to win. And I put together a good team. Had to assemble a manufacturer and an environmental specialist and all of these ologists that made up the torch relay design team. The tender came out. We did all of the research into the ancient games. We did a thorough investigation. So it wasn't just like I slapped together a tender and hoped to win. It was a deep investigation to the torch relay, what it meant. You know, the torch relay carries the sacred flame from Olympus and brings it into the stadium. But as well as doing that, it builds the cohort of support for the Olympic Games. It helps enlist volunteers. It sells tickets. It builds the whole momentum in the host country. So it's a massive PR machine, the Olympic torch. and it has sponsors, you know, IBM and Coca-Cola, and they're all in it. It's a big deal. Anyway, back in 1998, the tender came out. I put together this team. I wrote all the documents. We built a lovely design, and our model makers, Box and Dice, made the most exceptional model. And then I went to SOCOG. We were shortlisted, and I said, yeah, we're getting there. This is really good. We're one of 4 firms. 40 firms pitched. You know, Ken Doane did one, Philip Cox, famous Australian architects, did a torch, Mark Newsom did a torch. Everybody had a crack at this one. So we did this model, and then on the day, I went to the selecting board at SOCOG, and I must have given a very good pitch. You know, I sort of danced across the boardroom like this, you know, and I spoke about the unique character of the torch, and I went on at length. You know, it's a clever bit of kit. Let me just open it up. You know, inside is a little underarm cylinder which contains propane and butane and has a whole lot of smarts in the burner that stop it from going out. But anyway, I didn't know all that at the time, and I pitched it. And a few weeks went by, and I didn't hear anything. You know, I'm pacing up and down, put a lot of effort, unpaid work as a consultant. No one likes to do that. And finally got a call from SOCOG, the project manager, and he said, Mark, I've got some news for you. I said, yes, Joseph, what's that? And he said, Blue Sky has been selected to supply 17,000 Olympic torches to the 2000 Olympics. Congratulations. And I said, that's wonderful, Joseph, fantastic news. And he said, well, we'll come and see you on Monday for contract signing. Great, thank you very much. And I hung up. And then I went, oh my God, what have I done? I've got no idea how to do this. You know, I pushed so hard for something that I didn't really imagine, you know, I thought I could do it. And then as I started to learn more about it, you know, I had to burn in 100-kilometre-hour winds. It, you know, had to weigh less than 1.5 kilos, had to burn a clean burn, no emissions. The list went on of compliance and the contract and the whole thing, and I'm going, oh my God, why aren't I just doing mowers? So there you are. And what happened after that was, I guess I call it the Olympic spirit, because everybody that came to work on this project did the best work of their careers. You've never seen anything like it. John Harrington, the manufacturer, I'll never forget him. He really saved me. He helped solve so many problems. You know, things just dropped together on the Olympic Torch project. I've never seen a project like it since, where every problem we came up to went, oh, how are we going to solve the switch? What's going to happen when the burner? And Adelaide University did some fantastic work. They had it in wind tunnels, and they tested its performance and drawdown under certain conditions. When the wind's blowing across it, will it lick down and lick someone's hand? It had to be a fluorescent flame that the media could see from 2 kilometres off with their cameras, all these sorts of stuff. Anyway, it's history, and I got away with it, is all I'll say. Another good word is purpose. You know, as a consultant, we did lots of different projects, and some of them were quite inspirational and others were less so. You know, you're just working for money at some point, where you're helping a client make money. The project's okay, but it's just a living, really. It's not really what drives you and gets you out of bed. All the time you still say, well, you've got to maintain your professional ethics. And I was always enthusiastic about every project, because somebody's paying us, you know, we owe them to give it our very best thought and energies into it. As a professional, it's what you do. But occasionally projects came along where you really had a purpose. And for us, it was Cochlear, because, you know, as opposed to making watering cans for Yates or something like that, You know, it's a nice sort of thing, a watering can, isn't it? But with Cochlear, we found it a bit more profound, because if we did a good job and we recognised that industrial design, you know, it's one of the little cogs in the wheel, that all of the science behind the implant, the engineering, the clinical research that goes into a bionic ear is massive. And industrial design is the usability, the comfort and fit, the aesthetics, all of those aspects. But it's only, at max, 2%, isn't it? But at the end of the work, you sort of feel, well, I worked on the Cochlear products and I contributed to their experience for those people that are profoundly deaf, and I think we improved it. And that sort of is worthwhile. Emerging's a good one too, because as Blue Sky rattled along, we'd won the torch, we were starting to get some quite big clients. And it was sort of an interesting thing for me that big clients attracted big clients. And I often wondered when we were, you know, we had a studio in William Street, Paddington, you know, the biggest job we had might have gone for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, what are we going to do? And I was often thinking, why is it I don't get those jobs that go for a year? You know, where are those jobs? Who's doing them? And why isn't it us? And, you know, it took 20 years before we were in a position, 20 years before the big jobs were coming. So, you know, you've got to hand it to industrial designers like me for patience and grit, because it takes a long time. But anyway, this is the journey I had, and I'm sure others have done it faster than that. But one of the next big one was Qantas. And in 2012 or 13, Alan Joyce said, well, look, we park 737s up at the gate, so do Virgin. You know, our staff are trained to be friendly, our meals are slightly better, but we've got nothing to compete on. So we need to change the experience from when you step across the threshold into the terminal till when you take a seat in the plane. We have to streamline it, make it delightful. And so this was the next gen check-in, and that was our brief. So suddenly we went from being industrial designers where we might have got a brief to do this thing or to do that thing, this is the bag drop, but this time we got a brief from crossing the threshold door to the plane, every touch point, and that's experience design. And that sort of changed things for us. We then weren't just object focused, we were looking at the digital experience, looking at the comms, looking at the wayfinding. And the whole thing was quite an adventure because we were also had much bigger fees. We could employ specialists in all of those areas, digital guys, graphic teams, ergonomists studying CTV footage of behaviours. We knew where people moved in the terminal, how they trafficked through, what the blocking points were. We engaged with software engineers. We worked with Amadeus, which is the big program that runs all of the airlines. We had to piggyback onto that, and we put together this next-gen check-in with lots of other members, you know, like I've mentioned, software and the others, numbers of engineering and builders to transform every terminal across Australia for Qantas. Where before that, there was a desk and some clever architects had done lovely joinery, and this was way beyond joinery. It wasn't about doing lovely custom wood, you know, painted desks. It was about understanding behaviours and navigation and systems and rethinking it. So once we did this, it transformed Qantas too. And it was interesting, retail sales in the terminals all went up by 30% when this was installed in all of the terminals, because frequent flyers get there and they normally thought they had 30 minutes to wait in the queue to put their bags in, to put the tag on, and all of that palaver that they went through. They only had 5 minutes for shopping. So when the next check-in came in, they walked straight through and they had an extra 30 minutes to shop. So all of the sales went straight up. So all sorts of funny things happened, and it changed behaviours in all of the terminals. And now it's just, you know, it's a given. You check in at home, but the bag drop is still doing a lot of good work. And then from there we continued in this vein, and we did a lot of work for Commonwealth Bank, and it was an interesting thing because they had been used to hiring firms, you know, good architectural design firms, Woods Bagot and the like, to do their branches. And they had probably based, I don't know, their methodology different to ours. So we did an investigation, and we wanted to deeply understand CBA customers. We did all of the interviews. We met with all of the different types of customers. We created personas, we mapped, we did all of the stuff to deeply understand each type of customer's journey going into the bank. And then we changed the whole bank around and proposed that what we wanted to do was make a streamlined experience for somebody that we called fast money. And they don't want to go to the bank at all. Fast money just want to get in, get the contract signed and get out. So how do we enable that? And then we had others that would go in on pension day. They'd meet, you know, Marjorie and then have a coffee afterwards, and they would love to chat in the queue of the bank. You know, how do we make it a rich experience for them too? You know, because if we streamlined it completely, well, they wouldn't be able to chat. So there was all sorts of things that you had to understand, and the bank had never done this sort of research before. They'd never done user-centered design. And it was really quite interesting, and they enjoyed the journey because the CBA didn't know as much about their customers as we did. They'd done hundreds of hours of market research. They knew which demographic bought which home loan and which insurance package. They knew all of that stuff, but they didn't do any face-to-face, a designer meeting a customer, understanding their needs, and then writing some notes. And that was massive. So we really enjoyed the CBA thing. And then the years are going on now. Now I must be coming up for 30 years with Blue Sky. And I was starting to get fatigued, never of design, but of the business cut and thrust, put it that way. You know, quoting, you have to haggle a bit. You know, then you have to deliver the work, and there's expectations and all of the stuff that isn't really to do with designing things. You know, managing staff, looking after people's holidays, and, you know, somebody's sick right when we've got to present that morning, you know. So after 30 years, we're starting to get a bit tired of that. And I was very fortunate enough that Monash University had a vacancy for a research professor, and oh gee, it was just a breath of fresh air. So I took a job at Monash to help run the Health Co-Lab, which is a medtech research lab. And suddenly I didn't have to worry about sick leave or my billings targets every month, you know, to keep the rent and the salaries and, you know, all the stuff that goes on to run a business. You know, you've got to chat to your accountant and all of that. No, all I had to worry about now was design. And that changed me, actually. I suddenly had new spring in my step. And I was often down in Melbourne. That's where their campus is, at Caulfield. And this is an example of one of the projects that we did, and this is the Bionic Eye project. And it's a piece of technology that is to restore sight. So somebody that's got damaged eyes and can't see, this device is intended to restore their sight. And it has a cortical implant in the back of the head, which is the visual cortex of the brain. So it's not unlike Cochlear in that it has an implant. It has a camera embedded into the glasses at the front, like an iPhone camera, and then it has a processor that distills that down into a series of dots so that somebody that is profoundly blind can see shapes of tables and individuals and people. And we worked on this for several years, and it was sort of very uplifting